Hello, everybody. My name's Milan Starcic. Welcome to Freedom Rising, a podcast dedicated to empowering individuals on the journey to personal growth, lasting serenity, and freedom from addiction. Tune in and join the movement. Your journey to freedom starts here. We neither represent, promote, or demote any 12-step program or organization. We are merely souls on the path of recovery with the desire to expand our lives and experiences and share them with you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 73rd Recovery Freedom Rising podcast. I'm Milan Starcic with co-host Scotty N. and no Brian W. because of an ice storm today. Today's topic is discipline. Can you share what this means to you, Scotty, and why you're happy to discuss this topic today?
Certainly, Lauren. So I thought of discipline as a topic because it's something that's very integral to my recovery and many of the people in recovery that I know, but it's almost never brought up as a spiritual concept. So I thought it would be really interesting to explore it and to talk about it and find out different aspects of what it means. Uh,
And just for clarity for people out there, then is it a spiritual principle or is it just a factor of living spiritually?
I'd say that it is a principle because it's required to live spiritual.
Okay. And there you got it. So, for me, discipline was something that the only thing I really had discipline for was my using inside my using. I sure made sure that I did what I needed for my addiction. But,
Mhm.
as far as discipline for my health, it wasn't there, was discipline for my integrity wasn't there. Discipline for spiritual principles overall in my addiction wasn't there. But one of the first things they do when you go to treatment, which is what I did, is they get you going on a schedule,
Mhm.
and the act of repeating that schedule brings some structure and some discipline into your activities, and and I've tried to carry that out into my program.
Mhm.
And some people would say, "Oh, isn't it boring to do the same thing day after day?" And not really. If you actually set yourself up for a pattern of growth, like to see steady growth and to experience new things inside yourself and in your life, it's quite a magical thing for me. And none of this would be happening without discipline. So, you
Mhm.
know, um, for me, I was really excited to talk about this because I think that, when people aren't disciplined with their program, that stinky friend of complacency comes to town.
Mhm.
And that complacency is, it's a relapse waiting to happen, is what I've
It's a
seen.
it's a killer.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And so I was happy to discuss this because I knew that Scotty was going to have some golden treats for us here today, and I'm always happy to share them. So I'm going to jump in and ask you a question, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so acting on the commitments we make requires discipline. And that's a skill we develop as we practice. It doesn't come naturally to most of us, but our long term goals are often served by postponing short term gratification. How has your discipline changed in your recovery?
Hmm. Well, okay. So this is I want to make a quick aside, and then it's twofold. So
Okay, yep,
my quick aside is just that you mentioned structure, right? And one of the things I've found for myself, and I know for others because I've talked about it with them before, is that as addicts we do very, very well in structured environments, right? You look at treatment centers or structured environments. I've never been to a treatment center, but I've gone through numerous psych ward stays and mental hospital stays. And in that environment, things are very structured, you know? And I think that's why they call them spin drives, because we do very well in that short period of time. And then when we get out, imposing that structure onto ourselves is very difficult. And I'm very bad at it. But the way so the way I look at discipline today in my recovery and in my journey is I would talk about the difference between motivation and discipline. So when I mean, we talk about um, the gift of desperation, and I think that's very powerful because I definitely experienced that. Where when I first came in, um, I was very highly motivated to do things that I needed to do to stay clean. Actually, I should say to get clean. And then as my journey progressed, um, it switched over to staying clean. And that's where I needed to exercise self-discipline. I actually I came up with a bit more material for this podcast than I had last week. I wanted to show you one. I think this is a better exemplifies what I'm trying to say. So the difficulty is making the decision. The difficult thing in recovery is making the decision to get clean and then the decision to stay clean. It's a decision that we make over and over and over again. So for me today, discipline is very much imposing as much order onto myself as I can. And I really believe that if I have goals or ambitions, um, dreams, especially dreams. So a dream that I'm just dreaming about will never come into fruition. But I have to be able to break things down into bite-sized chunks that I can do on a daily basis that allows me to accomplish the tasks required for me to achieve my goals and ambitions. I think that one of the ways I think it shows up really well is in for myself, and it's been a process, right? But I'm on a pretty strict diet right now. I try to get to the gym regularly. I do things for my health. Like you mentioned, we don't in addiction. I wasn't doing anything for my health. So today, you know, I guess the way it manifests in my life today is, um, yeah, sleep hygiene, regular food, regular shower, regular gym. And yeah, some people might look at some of that stuff as monotonous, but I think that, as Jordan Peterson would say, our purpose in life is born from um, our responsibilities. And to step up every day and take care of those responsibilities is a very fulfilling thing to do. So I hope that can answer the question.
I think it did wonderfully. And for myself, how has my discipline changed in recovery? Well, I would say that first of all, my discipline has become important to me. Whereas it wasn't even ranked on things that I worried about, before recovery. I came out of treatment and, I was really happy with my journey on the steps and I was really happy with where I was at. And, I quickly became overwhelmed with trying to have my full life and my full
Mhm,
recovery. And and then the saying that anything you put in front of your recovery is the first thing you'll lose. That just echoes in the head of someone new in recovery. But,
mhm,
there's also the fact that there's only so many hours in the day. And
mhm,
you do have to deal with jobs and family and food and like real survival things, like I could be really great at working the steps and not eat a bite of food and die, you know, or
mhm,
or not have somewhere to live and be outside in the winter in Canada and freeze to death.
mhm,
Like there is certain things. So, you know, um, for me, it was like a rebalance. A rebalance had to occur inside my life, and then I had to have the discipline to keep my brain from freaking out every single day, thinking I was taking too much from my other life, and and you know, in order to have some serenity in the program that was saving my life. So
Mhm.
it was that was, you know, kind of a real struggle for the first 6 months at least.
Mhm.
And then, you know, and then as Scotty says, it's like it goes from getting straight to staying straight. uh,
Mhm.
and and your needs do change. Like you may
Mhm.
need 90 meetings in 90 days, and some people may need a meeting a day forever. And you know, I know that, you know, if I hit a meeting every day, I'm definitely better inside my brain. But you know, if I hit 5 meetings in a week, am I feeling like I'm risking my sobriety? And that's not the case right now for me.
Mhm.
You know, so it's also learning that that change is okay. But you know, things like the discipline to make sure I'm going to bed and trying to get enough sleep. You know,
Mhm.
trying to eat a better diet, making sure that I'm doing more exercise. Those are things that every single day, that choice is it's got to be made for the better. And you know, and
Mhm.
I've been mentioned it on the podcast before, but I've been listening to that Untethered Soul and Living Untethered. And one of the things he talks about is identifying the different voices in your head. And, you know, I have a really good voice that says, that's enough. Fuck it. Stop. You know, like,
Mhm.
especially in the case of exercise or eating right. You know, like that little, and, you know, and the funny thing is, he makes a great point. He's like, if that voice was like an external friend, you would call that like lunatic Charlie, because lunatic Charlie's never right. You know,
Mhm.
like if you always stop exercising early, if you always eat that snack that's gonna make you feel like shit, like you're never, there's no discipline in your action. You know, like pushing
Mhm.
through that uncomfortability in my program and in my life, that's where growth occurs. And that's one of the hardest things is to recognize, because as human beings we seek comfortability, we seek
Mhm.
the easier way. And so, you know, having that discipline to push through it is really what enables us to have growth, you know, and to change. And you know, so one of our greatest weaknesses, you know, it also allows us for our greatest strengths.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yeah, you got a question now, Scotty?
Yeah, I got something to throw out there. So
Boom.
actually was my nickname for a long time, or one of them. Scotty Boom.
Scotty Boom?
Yeah.
Scotty Boom, 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 boom. I love it. Oh boy, you're going to be Scotty Boom from now on.
I actually changed from Scotty Boom to Scotty Boom Body. But anyway,
Scotty Bobati?
yeah.
Scotty
So
Bobati. Scotty Boom Bobati.
so what one of the things I thought about was a science analogy for for discipline. So
Mm-hmm.
uh are you familiar with entropy? I'm sure you've come across it. It's a
Mm-hmm.
the physics idea or chemistry idea, but it applies to everything. So the way, for those who don't know, the way entropy works is that if you have a system and it's in a certain order, then it needs energy, or it needs to have some of that order imposed on it. So it needs energy, or it'll devolve into a more uh, random state. So like ice is an ordered crystal, right? The atoms are kind of locked in place, and they only move in that place. They vibrate, and then as the ice melts, it becomes more disordered because the atoms have more ways to move around. They're no longer fixed in place. So I thought that was really interesting. And oh, hold on a second. Sorry. Uh, so when we talk about practicing the principles in all of our affairs, how does discipline relate to that?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. You know, it is discipline is the master that makes it transfer to all of our affairs. You know, like it absolutely is the discipline to, bring integrity into your life that would
Mhm.
allow you to remain honest, not just in front of other people, but alone and by yourself, to yourself, or, in multiple situations. And also, at those moments that you want to fall back into old habits and say, have intolerance for somebody when you've been trying to practice acceptance and tolerance, you know, it takes discipline to stop yourself, to try to retrain yourself. Like,
Mhm.
all of the growth inside this program is a lot of steps forward and a lot of steps backwards and a lot of steps forward and a lot of step backward. And if you don't apply discipline to that, cycle of forward and back that eventually leads to slightly higher and higher plateaus of growth, you'll just atrophy. Like, you'll recognize is the negative, and you won't, use those steps forward as the strength to keep trying. Like, discipline is that strength to keep trying when, even, like, it is like the repeated movement of somebody in a martial art. Like,
Mhm.
nobody's kicking like Bruce Lee the first kick. Bruce Lee kicked like Bruce Lee kicked because he kicked hundreds of thousands of times to perfect that
Mhm.
kick. And it's the same with the spiritual principles. Like, it's a learned behavior to actually be able to implement them. It's not like magically there's a wand and I'm like, Scotty, here's 12 principles and now go forth. Spread it to the world. Like, and then Scotty's like, honesty. Like, that's just not how it works. And it's such a
Mhm.
bigger struggle than people see, like, they're the discipline and the courage it takes to continue on growth inside these principles is has been the hardest one roads of my life, and I just don't think it's easy. And yeah, I think that's pretty much where I would leave that one for me. And what about
Mhm.
you, Scotty?
Well, I'm going to follow up with a quick quote, and something we'll talk about a little bit later. I think it'll come up. But the quote is, "No man is free who is not a master of himself." And so, when I look at this, I think that there's freedom. There's freedom in discipline, which is kind of paradoxical. But when I think about the discipline in my life today, I think that much of it is learned behavior. When it comes to practicing principles in all my affairs, there's a very practical side of that we've touched on, right? Like the sleep hygiene, the eating, taking my medication at a regular time, that kind of stuff that made a direct impact on my quality of life, right? Those are physical things. But when it comes to something like prayer, so I never prayed in my life until I came into recovery. And now I have to practice prayer. So, you know, I was told that to pray when I wake up, say. So it's now it was in the beginning it was forming that uh, conscious awareness to pray in the morning before other things are happening, right? So eventually, over time, it became second nature to pray in the morning. And then once it became a second nature, I can start tailoring those prayers according to my spiritual principles. So one of the things I pray for in the morning all the time is gratitude. I open my prayer with thank you, God, for another day, for the opportunity of another day. And then there's praying at night. And getting into the habit of doing that, getting into the habit, and I'm not good at it, but getting into the habit of a 10th step, right? That takes discipline. I have to consciously sit down and look at my life and be like, am I actually doing a good job or not? Am I comfortable with my life or am I not? How does my higher power look? So there's a lot of things that we practice doing a step, um, where when we start practicing it repeatedly and repeatedly, it becomes much more natural to do. Like when I there's the term thinking, right? So early in my recovery, uh, it was hard for me to keep my mind on track. It would get easily derailed, right? And then my mind gets derailed, my emotions get derailed. It's just a train wreck. But practicing and becoming aware of the signs and practicing acting on them before things get out of hand. And I think that's where I think balance comes into things a bit too, where uh, the program has taught me that it's not about chasing joy, and it's not about fearing negative emotions or emotions that I perceive to be negative, but it's about finding that balance in the middle, right? That's where I think serenity lays when we're middle of the road. We're not up, we're not down, we just can exist.
Serenity for me is like a 6 or 7. Like
Hmm.
it's kind of more than unpleasant, but it
Yes.
yeah, at least
Hmm.
in my heart. Did you just finish or did I just cut you off?
No, I finished.
Okay, so I would like to comment upon that quote that you just read. Could you repeat that quote that you read? Is it right there for you?
Yeah, it's no man is free who is not master of himself.
Okay. That really set a series of thoughts in my brain once I heard that. Like, what it means for me is this: if I follow a program with discipline, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. I'm not worried about the next step. And I'm either in action or completing action or entering into a new one. But, when I've got it laid out like that with discipline, there's a freedom in my mind. When I'm just aimlessly swimming about with no discipline, I'm worried if I'm doing the right thing. I'm worried if I did the right thing. Like, it pulls me from the present moment to not have discipline. It breaks my conscious contact with my higher power to be undisciplined. And when I'm disciplined, that freedom is there because I can actually just be where I'm being without that question mark of am I doing the right thing right now or not?
Mhm.
Like that quote really just for me, it opened it up beautifully. And I just feel
Mhm.
like I needed to comment on that. And, because I feel like for myself, when I am acting with discipline, life is just a simpler thing to be part of. And
Mhm.
inside that
Mhm.
simplicity is where I find my serenity.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like people are like, oh, isn't it boring doing the same thing over and over? I'm like, no, sometimes it's real relieving,
Mhm.
you know?
And
Okie doke.
it's such a for me it's such a non-natural state. Like I became so used to procrastinating and putting things off, and now I find with regular application, I don't have to worry about if things are getting done or not because I'm doing them.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Like you're literally saying what I said. It's like it eliminates worry by
Hmm.
acting with discipline.
Yeah,
Because you know that you've done everything you can do
yeah,
and
yeah,
that you're on it and following following your schedule.
yeah.
Okay, I got a question for you, Scotty.
All
And
right, I got an answer.
Okay, discipline is commitment in action, a demonstration of our willingness. It is different from willpower or self will in that we're not trying to force ourselves to change. We are changing our relationship to our own behavior. The more we trust the process, the more we are willing to practice discipline. Was this the case for you? How or how not?
It was the case for me and continues to be so. Uh, I've definitely spent periods of my recovery where I was trying to force my recovery. I was trying to force uh, self-help onto myself and trying to
Not surrender?
basically, yeah. And
Yeah.
when you bring that up, it makes me think of step 7, right? Humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings
It doesn't say I'm going to work on shortcomings all day. I'll get it done in 8 hours. It says
no,
asked him to remove them. Like,
and get out of my own way.
yeah, I know.
Right? And it's so powerful. And it's funny, like I've been going to the gym, I think 2, 3 weeks now, and I used to be a gym rat. And over the last 20 years, countless times I've tried to force myself to go to the gym, and it never stuck. I mean, 3 weeks in, maybe it's not going to stick this time, but it feels different. And the feel different is that it just happened, right? It was the next logical step in my recovery health journey to start going. It's within walking distance. I live near a rec center here in Red Deer. It's within walking distance. Really nice facility, and I don't have all that negativity that's been built up in my brain that I have to fight with when I go. And like you mentioned before, it was such a fight just to get there that I would end early and I wouldn't put my best effort in because all my energy was in getting there. And I don't feel that this time. And a lot of it is because it's the next piece of the puzzle. And it was the wrong puzzle piece for a long time because I wasn't doing the other things that go along with it that would enable me to do it, right? Like I wasn't eating clean. And if I'm not eating clean, then going to the gym is an uphill battle, right? Not sleeping well, so I'm too tired to go to the gym. So like that. And when it comes to recovery, I think that uh, for me, uh, the biggest change lately has been my meeting attendance. Because for a, um for a long time I was unemployed, I was on disability. I had nothing to do with my time really. I mean, well, there's some things to do with my time, but I had a lot more free time, so I was able to go to uh, in-person evening meetings pretty much at will whenever I wanted to. And then there's the Zoom meetings. So I would often do 2 meetings a day, one Zoom, one in person. And that was good. And I'm very thankful for that because I think it made a huge benefit to my recovery. But then, my life started getting busy, right? I moved in with my fiance, we got married, we have different responsibilities. I'm part-time employed now. So those things tested my discipline, right? And suddenly, 10 meetings a week wasn't feasible anymore. So now I have to exercise more discipline to do 2 meetings a week than I did when I had to do 10 meetings because I I'm limited and I have to act within those limitations. Because if I don't, that's when we start getting into that complacency thing that we were talking about and start going, oh, I'll just miss this meeting. But it's different because before, if I missed a meeting, well, I'd have one to go to the next day. Now I'm at 2 or 3 evenings a week. If I miss one of those, I'm down a third. So it's kind of
It's
what
a
I
big
think.
percentage change, 10% versus 30 to 50%.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
So for myself, I'm just going to read the question again out loud. Discipline is commitment in action, a demonstration of our willingness. It is different from willpower or self will in that we are not trying to force ourselves to change. We are changing our relationship to our own behavior. The more we trust the process, the more we're willing to practice discipline. Was this the case for me? How or how not? Well, it really was changing my behavior.
Mhm.
You hear a lot of old timers jokingly say, oh, you only got to change one thing when you in this program, everything. And and that was my case. My case is really slowly rebuilding myself after 51 years of pattern. And
Mhm.
and so, the willingness. I love that they say discipline is a commitment in action, a demonstration of our willingness. Like it certainly is a demonstration of our willingness. Like how much are we willing to do in order to make these changes, to live a different way?
To
And
stay clean.
huh? What's that?
How much are we willing to do to stay clean?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And, and in my case, that means staying alive. Like
Mhm.
E equals live squared. but so the more I trust the process, the more I'm willing to practice discipline. Well, it's happened. Like Saturday was the 1 year anniversary, and I did it just before my 6 month mark. I quit smoking a year ago, so I'm a year smoke free. Later in last year, it was getting rid of coffee and just switching back to tea. Like I'm I'm slowly pushing myself more and more to the version of me that can host these changes. You know,
Mhm.
like honestly, like for me not being able to breathe and just being jacked out on coffee was not a serene place. Like there was just no way where I could say like, oh, like I'm still killing myself with cigarettes and caffeine and I'm feeling good about that. Like I just wasn't. I was feeling like it was like, well, just because it's not named in the book and it doesn't alter my mind doesn't mean like it's not,
Uh-huh.
damaging. And, like either I feel like for me is that I'm making this pledge to try to love myself, you know,
Mhm.
and that means to try and bring out health in myself. And so the more I get into it, I'm seeing results. Like I just made a choice yesterday to try and re-record some vocals that were I did 14 to 16 months ago, right when I came out of treatment. And my ability to sing with cigarettes was so much more diminished, and my lung power was so much more diminished. Like I can see actual verifiable results. You know, I, I left my AA meeting on Friday and it was music night. And I said, hey, who wants to, I'm at the AA meeting and I'm like, hey, who wants to come to the bar with me to watch me play a few songs? And that was a funny announcement. Some of the people were like, what are you doing? But my point with that was that my recovery's feeling so good that it's like I can walk in a
Mhm.
room full of people drinking, and that's not my solution. And
Mhm.
so, you know, the more I definitely trust the process. Like tomorrow
Mhm.
is my 18 month, and I really have 100% faith that if I do what I do every Monday for my recovery, I'm going to be on tomorrow's podcast straight.
Mhm.
Like and that faith, the more I trust the process, am I willing to have the discipline to go and do the other things I do for my recovery today? I am damn
Mhm.
sure I'm willing to. And why? Because I know that this is the only path that's led me to being straight and happy this long in my entire life. And I think I'm going to leave it there because I love you, Scotty. And I want a question from you.
Yeah, just before I start, I want to rebuttal you were talking.
Oh, I love when you
And
rebuttal. Or
Um,
I would say more like it's like accent
hmm, hmm.
as opposed to a rebuttal. I don't think you're coming against it. I think you're coming with
Yeah,
it.
it's not really a debate.
It's like an icing on the cake.
Yeah, yeah. Anybody that tells me that smoking is not a mood or mind altering substance
Yep.
needs to try quitting.
Yeah. Whoa. Yeah, exactly. Whoa. That is so true. Because, man, I get bitchy.
Yeah, I tried quitting a week ago, week and a half ago, and it did not go well. So
Yeah. Were divorce papers put on the coffee table?
right.
I know. I,
Um,
I would try to quit every time my wife went away because it
mhm,
was like, I would like try to plan 3 to 7 days. That was like my bitchiest window.
mhm.
And I finally did it by double patching with the spray, and then that was it. Like, I'm just tapering the patch size over time.
Yeah. No. Oof. I do plan on quitting someday. Yeah, yeah.
How old are you, Scotty?
I am 40 years old.
Okay, so like you're still 12 years ahead of me, man. You got lots of time to quit, man.
Yeah. One of the things I thought that was interesting was you talked about the progression of things and how faith and the process is related to that. And I think that it's a really important thing for people to recognize is that the reward of faith is more faith. So
Yes.
the more faith I have in the process, the more willing I am to act spiritually. And the more spiritually I act, the more rewards I get. So I start getting proof that the process is working. And it's a snowball effect that you can keep rolling. So it's like we take small steps, yes. And the act in me is like a small step isn't worth it. You have to go until you burn out,
Mhm.
right? But that's not the way things work anymore for me. It's about small, manageable steps. And then 6 months go by, and it's like, look at all these changes I've made, right? Look how far I've come. So I want to talk about that. The other thing I wanted to talk about today that I think is really interesting, and I'm not sure if it's much of a question or not, but I'm sure you'll have something to say, is uh, the concept of discipline and neuroplasticity.
Oh, yes.
I'm not sure if you've heard of that
I'm a
term.
100% an advocate, and I know not lots about it, but I know enough about it that, yeah, keep going.
Okay, so when I was looking up discipline things to talk about today, came across an interesting one, and I've I've heard about it before. So there are areas, I think two specifically, but areas in our brain that are directly related to discipline and self-directed action,
Hmm.
right? I know there's some there's the prefrontal cortex, which is like impulse control, uh, self-control, impulse control, that kind of stuff. And as an addict, I didn't have that at all, right? Because because it got to the point where when I was quitting or trying to quit, um, I couldn't. I would use against my own will, right? I would I would wake up and I would say, I'm not using today. I'm not going to do it. And then noon would roll around and I'd be high. So that that part of the brain is, but that part of the brain through practice, through those small steps, can actually enlarge and grow more dense. And they've done studies that show athletes have higher levels and larger sizes with that part of the brain because so that to be I mean like a collegiate or professional athlete where there's so much self-discipline in going to the gym and eating properly and competing and pushing your body physically that that part of the brain is higher with them. And it's also higher in people that are older, like like people that live 90 plus. That part of their brain is a lot stronger too. Uh, then not super sure the correlation there. But for me, I take great comfort in knowing that there's a part of me that I can physically change by being taking those small steps, right? I thought that was an interesting thing to share. I don't know that much about neuroplasticity, so maybe you can shed some
Yeah,
light there,
so
but
one
it's
of the
pathways, right?
most significant neuroplasticity changes I've seen in myself relates to my cell phone. I used to know, like, Cortez Island had like 1,000 people on it. When I moved there in 1995, I pretty much memorized that phone book, like of every person's number. Like, it was crazy, but I used to dedicate this large part of my brain to memory. And now I have everything in my phone. And what I say is that I'm no longer a storage device. I'm a processor now. And my phone
Mm-hmm.
is my storage device. And some people
Mm-hmm.
are like, oh, that's not a good thing. And I debate that all day long because having a greater amount of my brain to react to life as it's coming and having something that goes bing, bing, because part of the reason that I had a great memory was that my brain would cycle on things quite a lot like my addiction. And so it would be like, I would never be late for our 11 o'clock appointment because in my brain it'd be like, meet Scotty at 11, meet Scotty at 11. 5 minutes later, meet Scotty at 11. Hey, don't forget you're meeting Scotty at 11. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that occupies a lot of your brain because the way that it would be temporally actuated was by a repetition. It would be a repetition, and that repetition occupied that moment of thought. And
Mm-hmm.
now I seriously have like no stress on that. Like if my phone goes bing, then that's when I do something. And that's just how I let it roll. And it's a really good thing for me. I actually enjoy having that part of my brain free. But
Mm-hmm.
another relation into neuroplasticity for me was with music. I was not a childhood musician. I didn't start playing till I was 20. There's like, when I would play for extreme number of hours practicing, it literally felt like the distance between my fingertips and my brain got closer. Like after a lot of hours of playing, it felt like my fingertips were like right at my brain, and that there was like more of my brain was, I got faster highway to the end of my fingertips. And um, so inside recovery, like coming into recovery, I knew that there was changes I could make, you know, and I was just hoping there was enough brain left to do it,
Mm-hmm.
but the first thing I had to do was stop polluting it, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
that was painful. Like most people's stories of, it just wasn't great. And then, the brain power that was left there immediately, it just wasn't functioning well. It hadn't been fed right. It hadn't had the proper sleep in years, decades, even in my
Mm-hmm.
case,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was, it took a lot of discipline of self-care to begin to start to change my brain. You know, I when you talked about the athletes being, having a stronger part of that of their brain, it's funny because we don't always have to walk straight to the door and grab the door handle to open the door most efficiently. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Um, I feel that we can enhance part of our brains through other activities and have the benefit in different parts of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Like for sure, getting my blood flowing and exercising more has been one of the greatest recovery enhancements for me. Like it just felt like a real stagnancy inside my energy, inside my thought processes, inside my ability to be disciplined until I started moving regularly. Like, and now, now I'm kind of doing like 8 to 10K of walking every day. And it's the only thing right now where I just don't get injured. Like if I started doing too many pull-ups, bang, I was injured. I started doing too much of this and bang, I was feeling an injury. But it's like walking fast, I can walk fast all day long. And it has a lot of benefits on my energy level, on my ability to feel disciplined, and also though on my ability to keep an even keel mentally through the day. Because as the static electricity of a bunch of things that are really intense with work build up, then I go walk. I'll take like a walk every 2 to 2.5 hours and keep that interval so it breaks up my day and regrounds me you know
Mhm.
but I 100% believe in the neuroplasticity and that we can change how much of our brain's devoted to something, but it takes a lot of repetition. And it takes and one thing I read about it that I totally believe to be true is it's not about cluster feeding, it's about regularity. Like if you are going to do something, it's better to do it 15 minutes 7 days a week than it is to do it 7 hours one day a week,
Mhm.
or like even touching
Mhm.
something 15 minutes per day is more valuable than bigger chunks less times per week if you're trying to build up something and make pathways in your brain, because it's that regularity that reinforces that root in your brain.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I like that. I often wonder too, that part of my brain that used to remember phone numbers,
Yeah,
what's it doing now?
for me it's
And,
processing. For
and
me it
I absolutely love that viewpoint. I think that's really powerful. I really like that.
it allows me to just have more like instant processor.
Yeah.
And so when things are coming at me, I feel that I have a greater capacity to react to more things
Hmm.
than I used to, because
Respond.
a big part of it was on storage,
Yeah,
cyclical storage, like
I like that. I can really identify with that. And I would say that it's the ability to respond, not react.
yeah, exactly. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question, Scotty. Are you
All right, sounds
ready?
good. I am.
Okay. What begins as discipline develops into habit and it eventually becomes a pleasure. There is danger in this method, however. Substitution can be deadly, especially when it seems to be working for us. The hallmark of our disease is progression. When we notice that our relationship to an activity that has allowed us to justify unmanageability elsewhere in our lives, it's probably time for a good hard look at our actions, our motives, and our steps. How has your discipline become an addiction in other areas of your life?
Ooh, that's interesting. I'm just gonna write something down just to order my thoughts a second. So, so I think, hmm, so I can recognize a pattern in my recovery of gradually getting out of my own way to allow more positive changes to come into my life. But I think it's interesting that the idea you say where you're like, it's almost like you're saying focusing on one area and letting the other area collapse, kind of. So what comes to my mind? Two things come to my mind. One is when I stopped compartmentalizing my life. So one of the ways that I tried to institute discipline before in my life, I kind of viewed everything as um, separate in my life, right? So I had my life. So my life was made up of boxes, right? So I had a recovery box, I had a God box, I had a food box, I had a sleep box, I had a school box, all that stuff, right? And everything was separated and divvied up into these different boxes, and they didn't relate to each other at all. And that failed because it's not true, right? Everything in my life is interconnected, interwoven. And once I made that discovery, once I came up with that theory, I realized that concerted effort in one area of my life will actually spill over into other areas of my life. So, and for me, a really, really, really big shift happened when I was about 5 years clean. So when I was
Tell
about
us,
five,
tell it, tell us. Yeah, I was going to ask for you to tell us.
yeah, gladly. So, um, when I was about 5 years in, uh, I was still struggling really, really hard with my mental health. Right, and I've talked about it a bit on the show before. Like, I'm diagnosed schizoaffective. Was diagnosed schizophrenic for a while. Kind of changed a bit. Um, so I really struggled with my mental health in recovery for a while. Um, this was not a conscious effort, but practicing these principles on all my affairs. I was like, maybe doctors know more about this than I'm giving them credit for. Like maybe I'll trust some of the advice that's been given to me. And I can actually tell you exactly what happened was I got my medication bubble pack. That simple thing provided a linchpin for the rest of my recovery process. Because before that cyclical repeating memory thing, right, was about taking my medication and I fucked it up all the time. So even though I was so there's two things. So I got the bubble pack and I got put on a particular med, and it just revolutionized my life because so much of it spilled over into the other areas of my life. And what happened was is it allowed me to take my medication regularly, and it allowed me, and that with the combination of being on a medication that actually worked for me, that was like a shift in my life. That was a really pronounced shift. And I forget the original question.
What was that?
I forget the original question. I feel like I went on a tangent
Has
there.
your discipline become an addiction in other areas of your life?
Ah, yes. So as that relates to me, so then when I realized everything was connected, so once I kind of got my head on straight a little bit after that 5 years, I realized that putting too much time and effort into one thing would take away from other things. So I've learned that, um, like you said, it's better to put repeated small amounts into different areas of my life than to focus on one and go whole on it until I burnt out. Um, and that's where I think that the idea of balance comes into play, right? Where, um, because like when I was there was a times when I was abusing video games, and that abuse required other abuses to continue on. So while I was playing video games, then I would abuse caffeine, right? I would. So I don't know if it's necessarily that I focused on one area with such discipline, but it's that if I overindulged in one or two particular areas, it would require me to face deficits and face um, negativity in other areas in order to support the area that I was abusing. Does that kind of
Yep,
fit, you think?
absolutely. And I would even say that the question like, has your discipline become an addiction in other areas in your life? The lack of discipline can also be. that
Yes.
addiction, feed that addiction. Just in the same way that, I'm so awesome is the same as like I suck the worst is both pride, you know, like and so, discipline has two sides to it, really. For me, I know for a fact that music, there was points where, like I recorded 1,138 songs last year and wrote them, and I maybe was taking it too far, Tony, for part of the year. It became kind of almost an addiction to try to see if I could set a world record, and but consequently though. It really became kind of an addiction for a while. And I just kind of just, made a conscious choice. Like for this year, I'm like one or two songs a day. That's it for me is, like that is, I would like at least one because it helps me in my own meditation and feeling balanced. But, once I hit around two, it's like something else is getting left behind in my life somewhere that I'm not dealing with it. And I mean, one could say that maybe there's an addiction to doing this podcast, but I would argue that in that it doesn't feel the same way as music. Like one thing
Mhm.
about this is that there's different groups of people that I like to interact with. And it's like, I want to do the podcast with them all. Like I feel that, I feel that it wouldn't be the same podcast if I had one a week with 10 people versus four a week with 2 to 4 people.
Mhm.
Like it just,
Mhm.
it would be so diluted in actual conversation and content if you had too many
Mhm.
people. Like four has been a manageable number. And, if people join in tomorrow, we'll see if more is possible. But,
Mhm.
what I would say for myself as discipline become an addiction in other areas of my life is that when one area of my life is getting done so much, it creates an unmanageability in another. Then I
Yes.
feel like then I look at it like, okay, this is an addictive action or motive or
Mhm.
like this is not necessarily in my control if I'm letting other parts of what I care to be a balanced life, you know, reach unmanageability.
Mhm. I like that. Yeah.
Hmm.
I can identify with that.
And do you have another question for me, Scotty?
I do. So one of the things that uh, I've been faced with in my recovery, and I think we've touched on it a bit, but is uh, stopping bad behavior, right? So like we were talking about, like with you, we were talking about your music where it got out of hand,
Mm.
and then you needed to exercise that discipline to keep it manageable.
Yep.
And with smoking, is the same. So how do you stop an, or how do you stop a negative? Like what discipline is required to, like, say, cut out coffee? So, because then you're left with a deficit, you're left with a void, right?
And
Stopping
I
smoking,
would
you're left
I
with
would call it the transitory uncomfortability, right?
mm,
Like whatever I'm stopping that, especially, okay, if it's a substance like caffeine or nicotine, right? Like you even said, like it don't get pretty when you're quitting smoking cigarettes, right?
no, it
And
doesn't.
so for me, I got really sick of being that jerk to my wife. Like
Mm,
I was almost like, fuck, I'd rather die of cigarettes than put her through more quitting smoking Milan. Like
hmm
I swear,
hmm
like it got really to that point. But I think last year I did it the best that I've ever done it in doing the double patch and the spray and really having a scheduled taper to it.
hmm
So like, if I was like two super strong patches, right?
hmm
That was like I had 41 milligrams strapped to my chest. It was like, dude, you don't want a cigarette when you're that like and you're not bitchy. You're kind of like, oh, it's a kind of gross and uncomfortable. Um, but it's like taking a quarter off one of those patches, right? and then riding
Yeah.
a week or 2 weeks, then a quarter off that patch and riding a week or 2 weeks and riding a quarter. It's like I had to have a structure and a discipline to follow in order to do that. Like because I could have just said, I'm feeling bitchy this week. I don't want to take anything off it. And then all of a sudden, it was like July, and there was a week where I'm like, oh shit, I didn't put a patch on for a week. I was like, I guess I'm done. Like I
Hmm.
was just like, okay, guess I'm done now. And that was great.
Now, the question I have for you
Yeah.
as a follow-up is, was it because you were forcing it, or was it because you got out of your own way?
I think it was like with smoking was there was a rock bottom of health that was occurring.
Mm.
You know, like
Hmm.
I really I still like you could hear that there's some permanent damage for sure in my lungs, and I was having a really hard time singing a whole line in a song. Like
Mm.
and I could feel like I'm either gonna die from this in the next few years, like, and it didn't have that kind of effect until the last 4 years of smoking. It
Hmm.
was like the last 4 years, all of a sudden it was like, hey, this really isn't working. Like, and
Hmm.
and so there was a bit of a gift of desperation of wanting to stay alive and not die from it. But
Hmm.
you know, as far as it goes, though, my biggest barrier for quitting smoking was alcohol. When
Hmm.
I would hit 3 drinks, the fuck it, I don't care about consequences happen with alcohol every time, and that would
Hmm.
that would that would open the door to me smoking again, and that would open the door to drugs. And
Yeah.
so being quit everything, alcohol and drugs, that allowed me to actually have the strength of mind for the discipline required to actuate
Hmm.
that. And
Hmm.
that was the difference for me. It was no alcohol at all in
Yeah.
my life, right? So,
Hmm.
mhm,
Okay. That's cool.
yeah.
Yeah. So you got one up for me?
Oh, I certainly do. I certainly do. Okay, doing the right thing when no one is looking is an act of
Hmm.
service to what you believe. Some of us call this integrity. The sixth step calls it character. Whatever we call it, this practice is the discipline that forms the basis of our growing maturity. Has your discipline helped create integrity in your life? How or how not?
Most definitely it has. Most definitely it has. Um, it was, I remember, so it would have been grade 11 English. I forget what we were studying something, and the teacher was like, we were talking about integrity from the main character or whatever, I don't remember, but he's like, let's say that you you walk to school every day, and you pass a shop, and the shop has the fucking most fantastic leather jacket you've ever seen in your life. That would be oh so perfect, sitting in the window, right? And then one day, uh, there's a riot. There's power outages. It's a riot. Everyone's running around stealing shit. Windows are broken. You pass by this shop. The window's already broken. The leather jackets are sitting on the mannequin. And you know that you can take this jacket and you'll never get caught. No one would know. And do you take it? Right? So it was interesting because the class was divided, right?
Oh,
Class was
yeah.
divided, right? So we had like a talk about it, and that was that was interesting because I remember that. I remember that conversation, and I thought that was really interesting. And in my active addiction, I stole all the time, right? I would whatever I whatever I could get my hands on. right? Or there were times when I would shoplift to eat because I spent all my money on drugs. I didn't have anything to buy. So, um, and I took a pride in it too. I, like my friends and I used to joke that like stolen food tastes better.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't know where we came up with that, but you know what I mean? So, uh, what I think so in early my earliest recovery, so this is quite a while ago, my earliest recovery, I remember thinking, well, you know what, if I get clean, I'm gonna be fucking rich, right? I'm gonna have so much extra money. And then I realized shortly that I won't because I have to actually start paying for things instead of just doing them, right? Like remember that? So do you remember torrents and like downloading entire
Yeah,
movies?
yeah.
And they used to have this reel that would start the government warning about stealing, right? And it said you wouldn't download a car. I'm like, fuck you, yes, I would.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I would be proud of that fact. So I think that's where some of the discipline started, where I had to mend some of my behaviors because it just didn't jive anymore.
Hmm.
And I think that that's kind of part of where integrity started for me, right? Um, I think that there were times introducing myself as a newcomer when I had been around for a bit, where I could probably have gotten away with lying and saying that I was clean. Actually, this is actually the truth. So I don't know if I've talked to you about this, but so my recovery has two phases, two chapters. There's my early recovery uh, when I had dirty time, and this is directly it. So, and then there's my recovery now, where I so the in between there was about an 8 month relapse, and after that 8 months, I came to NA, never looked back. Prior to that 8 months, I had 3.5 years of dirty time. So what had happened was uh, two things happened. One was I had I had a bit of time, 2.5 years, and I realized that there was a time I had forgotten around 6 to 8 months clean that I used, and I never considered it. Like it just flew under the radar for me. I never really thought about the fact that it wasn't my DOC. It was just kind of a random one night thing. It was my favorite drug, but it wasn't my DOC. I don't know if that makes any sense. But so that happened, and then I was like, you know what? I really ought to just fess up to people and say, this is my actual time. But I was too proud. I didn't want to give up that 2 years. And then I went on a trip where I took extra medication. So I was prescribed all these different pills. Some of them made me sleepy. I was going on a long flight. I thought, oh, I'll just take a few extra and sleep for the flight. Um, but I took too many. I got fucked up. And but I hid that from people. So people didn't know. And I ended up taking dirty time. So that's where my integrity failed. And it was a huge, huge driving force towards my relapse when I went on that run for 8 months, 6 to 8 months. And I was relieved when I could talk to people about
Yeah, I bet you were.
it. And then in that relapse, uh, I stole seventh. and I've paid them back now, and it's all, you know, but that's where my addiction took me. So that's the lack of integrity that my addiction gives me. And being in recovery now for the last time, uh, I've been able to mend those behaviors. That's like my groups will trust me with the seventh now. I'm treasurer of my home group or co-treasurer. So that's what I think. So I think that addiction took my integrity away from me. My word was no longer my bond,
Hmm.
and I can hold my head high today and say the word is my bond. So maybe a bit of a tangent, but
No, I think that was great, and I love how you brought that back to it. Has my discipline helped create integrity in my life? 100%. They're really, that I was really disjointed as a person between, you know, what you saw and what was going on inside of me, and I was not living in the present moment at all. My discipline has basically helped me start to build a new me bit by bit,
mhm,
and part of it's physically, part of it's mentally, and then part of it's spiritually.
mhm,
Like thinking I'm a strong person and lying about everything. Like
uh-huh,
that's just not integrity.
no,
And thinking I'm a nice guy and hurting everybody I love. That's not integrity. And then even just thinking that because I was stronger and healthier in my when I was younger, like and I just wasn't anymore. I'm having to rebuild that. Like so. I mean, I go through cycles of discipline and lack of, but there's definitely more discipline in my life now than has ever been in my adult life, and it is bringing
mhm.
about integrity for me. Yeah.
And another thing that comes to mind is people pleasing and
Ooh.
conflict avoidance.
Yeah.
So my knee-jerk reaction to people when I have to, or I should say, when I'm in a position to that would potentially let somebody down, that my knee-jerk reaction is to lie and to smooth it over and to avoid things, especially if conflict is involved, especially if conflict. And that's something that's improved over time because I don't require other people's opinions so much anymore.
Yep.
But
I think that's awesome. You got another question for me, Scotty?
I don't actually. I'm tapped out.
Okay. Well, I got two more. We might as well cycle through them if you
Yeah,
got some
sure.
time. It's
I got all the time for you, Milan.
okay. I love you, Scotty. Hey, did I mention that I love you? Because I did. As we find freedom from our disease through practicing the principles of this program, we learn that discipline is actually part of that freedom. We have the ability to pursue our dreams, and we get there one goal at a time. How has discipline been part of the freedom rising in your recovery? And yes, pun intended about the program name.
Yeah. Uh, because discipline is what's left when motivation is gone.
Woo! I like that.
So we were talking about before where you have the motivation in the beginning and eventually the motivation passes a bit and you gotta start discipline. And I think that the hard part because you talked about it a bit with the doing small bits at a time. You make more progress than spurts at a time.
Cluster feeding
Cluster
versus
feeding.
like habitual activity. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that cluster feeding. That's good. So I think that um so when I in my previous so in chapter one of my recovery, I had an immense amount of motivation. And I was like captain in A for a while and was making amends 2 weeks clean, trying to make amends with people and stuff like that. And it didn't go very well, mind you. But when I came back in, I was motivated. I was motivated to get a sponsor, and I was motivated to do what my sponsor told me to do. But my mind has a tendency to forget the last time I used, right? Especially in early recovery when I thought of using and the lifestyle accompanying using, it was romanticized. I remember the beginning when it was fun, right? Because I mean, using was fun for a while. We don't talk about it in recovery, but using for me was fun for a while. Otherwise, well, I probably still would have done it because I'm addicted. But you know what I mean? Like it roped me in. So there came a point in recovery when my mind would romanticize using, and then that's where the discipline starts for me. So I think that the way discipline gets carried out is that process of when that motivation is leaving and the discipline to go to the meetings, the discipline to phone sponsor, the discipline to do the different things that are suggested. And I think what's really was really difficult for me, and I still struggle with this today, is that consistency, right? So I probably would have been better served doing one question a day out of the step working guide than I would from sitting down, you know, writing for 2 hours and then being burnt out for a couple of days. That cluster feeding, I really like it. So that's what I think about where in the beginning, because my mind would tell me that I'm not doing enough, and it would tell me that it was embarrassing. Like that's the emotion that brought up to me, was that it was embarrassing to do so little at a time. You're better than that. You're smarter than that. You know recovery more than that. That kind of stuff. And that really inhibited my ability to be consistent with things. Uh, Now, that being said, once I was in for a bit, as I practiced that discipline, it was easier to practice that discipline. And one example is the fact that I took up juggling in recovery. And because of my mental stuff, regular meditation is difficult. And so I found alternate ways. And juggling was like that because you just focus on the repetition of the balls. You just focus on what you're doing, focus on what you're doing. My breathing would regulate, and I was able to kind of turn that treadmill in my mind off a little bit. So that's something where, and I stayed disciplined with that and had a routine. I learned tricks. So I would practice tricks for 20 throws. So now I'm counting my throws.
You
That,
need to play an instrument. I swear, man. It would be perfect for you.
yeah, I've tried off and on over the years.
But music is math. Bottom line.
Yeah, actually, this is a tangent, but I can tell you why I don't play musical instruments. And it's the
Okay.
same, and it's the same reason why I don't draw anymore. And it's the same reason why I have difficulty starting new hobbies.
Okay.
It's the same reason why I don't write poetry anymore. And that's because there's always going to be somebody better than me at it.
Ooh, comparative shopper.
Yeah. I've actually just come to this realization more recently
Hmm.
where it's an ego thing. That's
Yep.
all it is. It's an ego thing. I'm not willing to suck at something new.
Well, at least you're honest with yourself about it.
But I used to be fairly musical. I used to play tuba in my school band.
I've got two tubas if you ever stop by. You can play one of
What?
them. Yeah, I got
They're
two
like
tubas.
they're like
Yep.
3 grand. How do you
Uh,
have two of them?
they got a grant at the local school in Oliver, and one day one of my friends who worked maintenance at the school said that they threw out all their old brass. I got a baritone sax and two tubas in one night for free because
Holy shit,
they had to replace them, and I was like, it seemed like the most ludicrous thing ever. Governmental waste, man. Anyway, that's what that was.
man!
Yeah. But
I'll
anyway,
pay. I'll pay you to ship a tuba to me. I'm just saying.
yeah.
Just saying.
Well, okay. Well, woo, maybe. You know what? Oh, when's your birthday? I need your address. Okay, we'll talk about that after the show. Okay, is it my turn to answer that question?
Well, just quickly though, uh, music takes discipline,
Yep, it does. It does.
but it's healthy.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. So, how has discipline been part of the freedom rising in my recovery? Discipline has been the integral part. Discipline has been the part that's kept me from complacency. And as you brought up in that earlier quote that we talked about earlier, is that discipline brings the freedom into your life, literally, because I never thought of it until I heard that quote and started thinking about it. But it quiets all the insanity and the displacement of my attention towards the past or the future when I'm just actually acting with discipline in what I need to do in my life. So, there really isn't a part of my freedom that discipline didn't have a hand in,
Mhm.
whether it's even just the discipline of saying no, to whatever substance, that discipline to be consistent about that not being my solution anymore. The discipline, it's got discipline all over it. I mean, for me, it's it's living my program every day. That is the discipline in my action and in its entirety. And when I don't, you know, one of the things I love is that, for myself, a big part of my program happens before the workday starts. So it allows me to implement my program of recovery before the day and the universe starts hitting me. Because
Mhm.
by 3 to 5 in the afternoon, I can't say that I'm anywhere near as consistent in my actions as I am at
Mhm.
the early part of the day. So,
Mhm.
you know, but the discipline to form my morning in that pattern has brought the freedom in my life.
Yes,
And
I agree. I like getting up early and just
yeah,
taking care of lay the groundwork for the day.
right when I got back from Mexico, just because there was a time change, I stopped having my alarm go off.
Hmm.
And that really led to some really stressful days where I
Hmm.
was out of sorts and inconsistent and undisciplined. And I didn't like it. Like it was, I would have rather been a little bit more tired getting up a half hour earlier and on my schedule and on my program than not.
Hmm.
So I got one last question here for you, Scotty.
Okay.
Okay. Because of discipline, how much do you love Milan? Milan loves you. No, caring for ourselves leads to other kinds of freedom, including increased energy, freedom of movement, self esteem, and discipline. How have you implemented discipline as part of your program of self care?
Okay. So I have a specific example.
Okay, I want it.
Specific.
Boom.
So like I said, I've been going to the gym recently. my entire life, I hated cardiovascular exercise. Playing sports growing up, running was a punishment that you got for not doing your job.
Mm.
So I hated all cardiovascular activities. I also had problems with my knees growing up. So like bike riding would be painful after a while, stuff like that. This last time I've been going to the gym, I took a day and I'm only gonna do cardio. No. I done a workout. I was like, okay, I'm gonna finish cardio. And I did 20 minutes. And it's probably more cardio than I've done in the last 20 years, right? Like just to sit down and do it. I was like, oh, that was interesting. And then the next day I pushed it to 40 minutes.
Oh, that's a big
And
jump.
yeah, but I took pleasure in pushing myself. I took pleasure at being at, 25 minutes and going, I got a bit more in the tank, right? I got a bit more in the tank. And all of a sudden it was 40 minutes. And it sparked something because it made me realize that I have more control. That was an example of a situation where I had more control over myself than I thought I did. So it gave me a confidence boost. And it's really helped with my diet. And it's really helped with a few things because, the old Seinfeld statement, master of my own domain, right? And when I thought about it, it was something that um, I don't know if you've gotten into the Stoics at all. We
You know
haven't
what?
really.
I'm on the cusp of it. Stoicism is something that me and a couple friends have talked about, and I'm like I'm on the edge. So we're gonna have to save my stoicism response to a later podcast. But I want to hear what
It's
you're
okay.
saying.
Okay, so I've been introduced to Stoicism.
Hmm.
I have a sponsee that I lent a book, Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. I lent that to one of my sponsees because I've had it, but I haven't really read it too much. But um, the Stoic definition of discipline is crucial for cultivating and fulfilling a meaningful life, and that kind of encapsulates what we've been talking about today, I think.
Yeah, that I 100% agree with it.
Because if I can push myself to do 40 minutes of rigorous cardiovascular exercise
Hmm.
and be uncomfortable while I'm doing it, but do it anyway,
Hmm.
that has a direct translation to not walking down the candy aisle at the grocery store,
Yeah,
right?
it
It's
does.
direct, it's direct, it's directly correlating to not having that third cup of coffee. I mean, today I did have the third cup, but if I'm honest, but you know what I mean? Like there's a direct correlation there, and I'm more willing to suck at something new today because
Well, and
of
once you make one good decision, it instills the hope that you can make more good decisions, but it also gives you the faith that you can make one good decision.
Mhm.
And that one good decision just has to be the one you're making right now. Like if we're not living in the future, we just have to make one good decision now. And that
Yeah,
could be not going down the aisle. It could be the not the third cup of coffee, and it could be still going on that cardio,
yeah, no,
you know? And you could implement discipline in not futurizing your decision making and keep it there.
yes,
Yeah.
that's a really good point. I really like that.
Yeah.
Keeps you present.
Yeah. Exactly. And for myself, discipline has been a massive part of my recovery and my program of self care. Like saying no saying no to later things on days where I know I need my sleep, or saying no to trying to plan things early mornings after nights I know I'll be up. That is discipline to myself of saying, hey, this sleep is required. This sleep is part of my ingredient for sanity
Yeah.
and recovery, because I know when I'm overexhausted that the world is not getting the best of me and I am not making the best choices. I
Yeah.
am more likely to make poor food choices when I'm tired than when I'm
Hmm.
rested. I'm more likely to exercise less when I'm tired than when I'm rested. I'm more likely to make bad choices with my character defects and shortcomings in my interactions with others when I'm tired than when I'm rested. So having that discipline, in even just like, mentioning it in relation to my sleep, is a
Hmm.
massive, massive thing for me.
Yeah.
And but it's been all over my life. Like, I am literally ending this podcast, and while the file bounces, I'm going to walk my dogs again.
I'm going to the gym.
Well, there we go. Boom. Scotty, this has been a great podcast today.
Hmm.
Have I mentioned though that I love you? Just once or twice?
Maybe.
Anyway, that's it for my questions, and I hope you got a moment tomorrow if you want to drop in on the 18-month little celebration. I'll put the feelers out there to the other people who've been hosts. I don't know if anybody's coming or not. I kind of just
Hmm.
decided. I was thinking about what do I want to do, and two things I want to do is I want to make sure I'm of service at some point tomorrow, and I want to do like a live podcast with a bunch of the hosts.
That'd be
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
I'll do my best to make it.
awesome. Even if you could only jump in for part, just jump in when you can.
Yeah,
Well,
I'll
I
do
would
it.
like to say that I love you, and tune in next episode for more recovery fun. Catch you later, everybody. We love you, or at least I love you, John. Please help us help others. If you'd like what you've seen here today, please subscribe and share this podcast and help us get to 100 followers. We're looking for interaction with our audience. So please email recoveryfreedomrising@gmail.com or contact Milan South Okanagan Starcic on Facebook with questions, topic suggestions, or just comments. We'd love to hear from you.